frog gig. Now, a metal frog gig is a very handy thing to carry in your backpack because you can easily attach it to a stick with a piece of cordage like this, and it'll work great at getting frogs. But we don't always have that metal frog gig with us, and sometimes we have to improvise something from sticks, and that's what we're going to look at today. The first thing we need to do is split this stick 2 different ways to give us 4 pieces of wood up here at the top. That way we have 4 prongs on this gig. But to make sure that this doesn't split down the whole length of the stick, we need to tie that off with some cordage to stop that from happening. So I'm going to cut a piece of bank line and go down about 7 inches or so, and I'm going to start with a timber hitch knot. Basically all I'm going to do to tie that is put a bend in my cordage, twist it up 5 or 6 times, then put the other end through there to create a noose. Put that on here, tighten it down, and then I'm just going to wrap this stick nice and tight. Now I'm going to tie this off with a clove hitch. And that should help keep this stick from splitting too far. Now you'll notice this stick is at least above eye level for me. That way if I'm walking through the brush and I trip, I'm not going to stab my eye out. That's an important thing to make sure you never do. Okay. Now I'm basically going to split this limb in half by batoning my knife. So that split stops just above that cordage. Now I'm going to go the other way. You can see I have that split in half. Now I will split it in half the other way to give me 4 pieces of wood. And same thing, split should stop just above that cordage. Okay, now that I have that, I'm just going to sharpen this, just pretending like it is still round. It's a nice, long, thin taper. If you make it too short and too blunt, it's not going to work too good at getting frogs, and that's what we want it to do. So I'm going to call that pretty good for now. Now what we need to do is put some wedges in here so that this stays opened up. And those wedges can just be a simple stick. Don't have to be fancy. I'm going to get a stick that's about the right size. Then we'll just shove it down that split to wedge it open. Now we can do that going the other way. And we'll just hammer this down till it's sitting right on top of the other one. Alright, so you can see what we're getting now. We got those two wedges, and we have our gig. I think that this needs to be opened up a little bit more, because the whole reason that we're making this into 4 prongs instead of just a regular spear is so that we have more surface area that is after that frog. That way at least one tine is going to hit that frog. If you just have a single spear, there's less of a chance you're going to hit that frog. That cordage down about 1 inch. That way I can open these tines up more. And another thing that I'm going to do to get this open all the way is take another thicker branch and put it above my wedges to open up the area underneath them so that they can go down further. So that's just something that you're going to have to do depending on what kind of limb that you have for your gig. You're going to have to troubleshoot with that to get it the way you want. I got this gig opened up a lot more. That gives me a pretty good amount of surface area to go after frogs, and we got those nice long thin tines on there. Next step is to trim these sticks we were using as wedges flush with the gig head. So I'm just going to take my knife and cut in there at an angle and then do a flat stop cut. So I can kind of break that off. And I'll just do that to each of these. Alright, so that gives us, our wedges are now trimmed off nice and flush. Now what we can do is we can go in here and kind of dress up each of these tines individually. Make sure that they're nice and thin and pointy. And that gives us a pretty good frog gig. Nice and sharp. Got a pretty good spread on it. Could be a little bit bigger, but that's about as far as this one's wanting to go. Nice long, thin tines on it. So it's pretty good. Now the next thing that we can do is put barbs into here, which can be pretty tricky. You're basically just going to do an undercut notch, kind of like that. If you can see that, it's kind of what you're looking for, and that's going to make sure that you don't lose any frogs. So I'll just go ahead and do that to each of these tines. Now if we wanted to, we can do 2 barbs on each of these tines. Have one on each side. But I think I'm not going to do that for this gig, because if I do, these tines are going to start getting pretty weak. Now one thing to do if you plan on using this gig a lot is fire harden it. So basically you would stick that in the fire till this thing is flaming. Then you would bring it out and scrape these with a rock or maybe the back of your knife to further sharpen them, and that's going to zap all the moisture out of it, and then you can sharpen them back and they'll be a lot stronger. But for a short term gig, going out and getting a few frogs, this will probably work pretty good.